Next up we have Hugh Cooney, CEO of Bleeper Bikes. Bleeper Bikes is Ireland's first stationless bike sharing scheme and currently has in excess, or slightly just under, 1,000 bikes operating throughout Dublin. Discussing two wheels can do it all in an urban environment, Hugh Cooney.
Thank you very much, Conor. So, as Conor said, the title of my presentation is Two Wheels Can Do It All in an Urban Environment. So I'm going to talk about three different vehicle classes that all have two wheels. Firstly, the pedal bike, secondly, the electric bike, and thirdly, an electric cargo bike. And before I do that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Bleeper and what exactly, when we started and what we do today. So Bleeper started in 2017, and it's a stationless bike scheme. So unlike station-based scheme like Dublin Bikes that a lot of people will be familiar with, the bikes have smart locks on them, and as a result they don't need stations in the ground that the bikes are docked into. So this innovation started back in 2016 in China, and it spread very quickly across Europe and America. However, there were some downsides to the fact that there wasn't a docking station that the bikes were put into, in that some of the users were parking the bikes recklessly. So when we looked to launch back in 2017, that concern was recognised by Dublin City Council, so they decided to draft bylaws to govern how an operator like ourselves must operate within the city centre. So that process took in total 6 months, and the bylaws were drafted. And there were a couple of critical pieces in the bylaws that have ensured that stationless bikes have become a success in Dublin so far. The most significant one was that on our bikes there must be a locking cable on the bike, so that our bikes are parked to a standard bike rack, rather than up against walls or in general areas that will cause an obstruction to other pedestrians. So we eventually applied for a licence under those new bylaws in early 2018, and were granted the licence in June 2018 to begin. So we've been operating now the bike scheme in Dublin over 3 years, and as of today we operate all across Dublin City Centre Council area, along the coastal mobility route in Dunleary, and we're widely available across Fingal. In fact, this map has since been extended, so now you'll find Bleeper Bikes as far up as Balbriggan in the north of Fingal. So we have a total of 800 bikes in the fleet, spread across that purple section on the map. In terms of why a stationless bike is good as a transport solution in Dublin, well, bikes are obviously a zero emissions way of getting from A to B, sustainable transport, climate friendly, and of increasing importance, they're very good for people's well-being. The health and mental well-being benefits you get from cycling are well proven, and they are just one of the many reasons why bike sharing is a very good solution for getting around. So that's a little bit about Bleeper, our company. However, the main topics I wanted to cover today is to try and provoke some thought as to whether people working and living around the Sandyford district could really rely on a two-wheel vehicle as a means of getting around. So I'm going to talk about the pedal bike and how that can get you around the Sandyford area. I'm going to talk about the electric bike and how that can improve things further. And I'm going to talk about cargo bikes, how that can also assist with people who maybe need to do deliveries around the area. So the first thing, the pedal bike. So this map here, the green going out to the red relates to the time it would take to get to these parts of the Sandyford area by bike. So you can see you can get almost all the way into the south of the city within a 30-minute distance. You can easily from the Sandyford area get all the way down to Dunleary, 30 minutes on a pedal bike, and you can get up to Stepaside as well. And in addition to the fact that you're doing that without emitting any harmful emissions, you're also doing it in many cases quicker than you would in a car. Especially when it's peak travel hours, I think it's fair to say if you were leaving from the middle of Sandyford peak hours, it's going to take you more than 30 minutes to get into Portobello in town or down to Dunleary. So the time benefits are exceptional on getting from A to B in a bike compared to how it would be with increasing traffic congestion on the roads. However, we are aware that certainly Sandyford area is quite hilly, and this map shows the topography. You can see as you come toward the southwest of the area, you're starting to encounter reasonably high inclines. And that's not always very enjoyable if you're on your commute in work clothes after a long day of work, having to take on those hills. However, there are parts of the area that are relatively flat, and you can easily observe the popularity of pedal bikes in those areas. So the Rock Road is very popular as a cycling route for people going in and out of work. However, it's probably fair to say people living in the depths of Leopardstown or up in Stepaside are going to be less likely to take a pedal bike all the way into town, or indeed students to UCD. I've just put UCD there on the image as a good reference point as a landmark in the locality. However, that doesn't mean the end of two wheels is an option for getting getting your way around Sandyford, because over the last few years, e-bikes are becoming increasingly accessible. However, I often get asked exactly what is an electric bike. So I'm going to try and break that down on this page to simply describe what makes up an electric bike. So physically, it looks very like a pedal bike. However, there are three components that are different. Firstly, you have a battery on an electric bike, you have a motor, and you have the drivetrain. So just explain a bit about that. So that if you're asked by people who aren't familiar with electric bikes, you can explain it clearly the next time. So obviously, with an electric bike, the big advantage is, unlike a pedal bike where you're producing all the effort that is going to turn the bike, on an electric bike, it has a motor. And an electric bike will have a motor in one of three places. It's either part of the front or rear hub of the wheel, or a mid-motor, which is essentially going to be part of your crankset in the middle of the bike. And just as a piece of information, generally the view is that the cycling sensation for a mid-motor feels a lot more natural as a cyclist than when the motor is in the front or the rear. If it's in the front, you have the sensation that you've been pulled along a little bit by bike. When it's in the rear, you have the sensation that you've been pushed along, and whereas when the position of the power is exactly where your feet are, it feels a lot more natural, and it just feels like you're cycling an exercise bike without any resistance being created. The other important part of it, connected to the position of the motor, is the drivetrain. So obviously the drivetrain is what propels your bike forward. On a pedal bike, when you turn the wheels in your bike and start moving the drivetrain, that creates the forward motion, and all of the effort is coming from your legs. However, when you have a motor on the bike, that drivetrain has been moved by the motor. However, one key difference between the position of a hub motor on the front or rear or a mid-motor is the initial engagement to get the vehicle moving when the motor is in the front or rear all will come from your own physical effort. Only when that initial bit of forward momentum is created does the motor kick into action. And that's why pedal bikes are often called pedal assist, as opposed to a motorbike that the throttle on its own will do all of the forward motion. However, with a mid-motor, it's much more sensitive to you engaging in the physical effort of cycling, and as a result, especially if you're on an incline, it's much more seamless to get the bike moving forward. Whereas on an electric bike with a front or rear hub motor, you're going to find for the first couple of meters you're having to put in the effort to get the motor to kick in and do its job. The other important part of an electric bike is obviously the battery. The battery is providing the power to the motor so it can do its job. Over the last 10 years, a bit like EVs, the development and innovation around batteries has improved significantly. They used to be very much a separate part of the bike and often attached on the rear. And there were exposed cables, and it was very obvious to the eye whether it was an electric bike or not. However, as sales have increased on electric bikes, more money has been spent on R&D, and now you can have electric bikes where it can be almost impossible to tell where the battery is. They're incorporated into the frame or designed into the frame in a very slick way. Indeed, just like EVs, the range of the batteries and the price of the batteries have all improved in favour of the consumer, resulting in electric bikes that can now quite easily do 70 kilometres on one charge, which is probably easily enough to cover most people's commuter distance. The final thing to mention about your battery is the charging of it. So unlike an EV, it can be charged with a standard home plug that would you use for any home appliance. So it doesn't need any specific or extra installation. So it can be charged with any of the sockets in your home, and it could be either detached from the bike, or you can bring the bike into home to do the charging. So the final of the three vehicles I wanted to introduce you to provoke the idea that two wheels can do it all in an urban or suburban environment is the cargo bike. And cargo bikes have become increasingly popular across continental Europe in the last 5 years. They're only just beginning to make an impact in Ireland. I first got a taste for cargo bikes when I was living in China back in 2006, and they're widely used there by self-employed delivery riders taking pretty large freight of deliveries around. But I suppose one big advantage they have in China is it's a very flat country, while most of the major cities are very flat. So getting a heavy load around can generally be done on a standard manual pedal alone cargo bike. However, that's not going to be practical in any city with hilly terrain. Over the last 10 years, we've seen an explosion of electric cargo bikes which allow for that. And we have worked this year with the Leary-Rathdown County Council to promote both the usage and awareness of electric cargo bikes for businesses in the locality. And indeed, the Sandy Forbid team are one of the participants in a pilot that was started in May. So working with Robert Burns and his team, we created an online application form where businesses interested in adopting a more climate-friendly vehicle for doing the deliveries could trial up for 6 months. The Leary-Rathdown are covering 60% of the normal cost, and the businesses cover 40% of the cost. Initially, we weren't sure whether we would get many applications at all, as many people didn't even know what a cargo bike was. However, we were happy to see that we were fully subscribed, and fully subscribed by a wide range of businesses. It wasn't just your typical takeaways taking up the bikes. We had clothes retailers, we have a company delivering car parts around the Leary-Rathdown, we have a company who does picture framing, and we have a photographer, and of course we have food businesses. So it goes to show that it's not just food deliveries that can find a use for cargo bikes, and it's not just for delivering to the end customer, because we do have, for example, a car parts user using it for delivering internally to their locations across the county. So it's not just about food deliveries, they're a wide use case. And on the slide here, we have an example of some of the participants in the Leary-Rathdown pilot that launched in May. So we have an ice cream company, the bike on the left, Dublin Gelato company. We have Fellini's in Dean's Grange, and the Sandy Forbid bike there on the right-hand side of the screen. So I hope that gives you a taste for the three different vehicle types and provokes some of you that may not be using a bike, an e-bike, a cargo bike, to challenge yourself to buy one, rent one, and see if that can substitute some of the trips you might otherwise done by car. The government's climate action plan has a short-term goal of trying to encourage us all to reduce our car journeys by at least one trip per week. And we believe at Bleeper that is imminently doable. Just one car journey less a week with any of these three vehicles we've demonstrated today, and indeed the team at Zip also spoke about scooters. That's another two-wheel vehicle that is part of the range of options you have now for getting around Sandyford and not always needing your car. Thank you.
Hugh Cooney, CEO Bleeper Bikes, thank you. Look, bikes are a no-brainer. We keep hearing about bikes, e-bikes, e-scooters, and we keep hearing that the journey, there's zero emissions and the health and well-being benefits to the people that are using them. So it makes no sense not to adopt that form of transport. It's also very interesting to learn about the different variations of the e-bike and how that impacts on the user. So that slide and all the other slides in Hugh's presentation will be available on sandyford.ie from Friday. Next up.